Throughout Hollywood's history, many actors and actresses have faced great pressure behind the scenes. The golden age of Hollywood had famous films and stars, but also personal struggles that led some to tragic ends. Stay with us as we will look at notable actors from that time who took their own lives due to various challenges. Join us as we honor their memories by sharing their stories, the difficulties they faced, and the lasting impact they had on cinema. First, Ross Alexander. Ross Alexander was an American stage and film actor who rose to prominence in the early 1930s. Born in Brooklyn, New York, Alexander began his acting career on Broadway before transitioning to Hollywood films. He signed with Warner Brothers and appeared in movies such as Captain Blood, alongside Errol Flynn, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Despite his professional success, Alexander faced significant personal challenges. His first wife, actress Aleda Friel, died by suicide in 1935, which deeply affected him. Additionally, he struggled with his sexuality in an era when homosexuality was stigmatized. Facing mounting debts and a declining career, Alexander became despondent. On January 2, 1937, at the age of 29, Ross Alexander died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the barn behind his home in Los Angeles, California. The combination of personal grief, financial difficulties, and career pressures contributed to his tragic decision. His death highlighted the immense pressures faced by actors during Hollywood's golden age, often concealed behind the glamour of the industry. Second, George Reeves. George Reeves was an American actor best known for portraying Superman in the 1950s television series Adventures of Superman. Born in Woolstock, Iowa, Reeves began his film career with a debut in Gone with the Wind as one of Scarlett O'Hara's suitors. Despite roles in numerous films, he found lasting fame on television as the Man of Steel. On June 16, 1959, at the age of 45, Reeves was found dead from a gunshot wound at his home in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles. The death was officially ruled a suicide, but the circumstances surrounding it led to widespread speculation. Present in the house were his fiancée, Leonore Lemon, and some guests. Reports of inconsistent statements, lack of gunpowder residue tests, and possible romantic entanglements fueled theories of accidental shooting or foul play. Reeves had reportedly been despondent over being typecast and struggling to find work beyond Superman. The ambiguity of his death has been the subject of books and films, including Hollywoodland, 2006, which explored various theories. His passing remains one of Hollywood's enduring mysteries, reflecting the complexities behind the public personas of its stars. 3. James Whale. James Whale was an influential British film director best known for his work in the horror genre during Hollywood's golden age. Born in Dudley, England, Whale directed classics such as Frankenstein, The Old Dark House, The Invisible Man, and Bride of Frankenstein. His films were celebrated for their atmospheric style and innovative storytelling. Later in life, Whale faced personal struggles, including the decline of his career and health issues following a series of strokes. Openly gay at a time when it was socially unacceptable, he grappled with societal pressures. On May 29, 1957, at the age of 67, Whale died of drowning in the swimming pool of his Pacific Palisades home in Los Angeles. He left behind a suicide note expressing his despair and desire for peace. Whale's death highlighted the challenges faced by artists dealing with personal identity and mental health issues. His legacy endures through his groundbreaking films, which continue to influence the horror genre and cinema at large. Fourth, Don Red Barry. Don Red Barry was an American actor known for his roles in Western films and serials. Born in Houston, Texas, he earned the nickname Red for his red hair and gained fame as the star of Adventures of Red Ryder. Throughout the 1940s, he became a staple in B-Westerns, portraying tough, sharpshooting heroes. Despite early success, Barry's career declined in the 1950s, and he faced personal issues, including alcoholism and troubled relationships. On July 17, 1980, at the age of 68, Barry died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his North Hollywood home in Los Angeles. Police had been called to the residence earlier due to a domestic dispute with his estranged wife, Barbara. Barry's death underscored the personal struggles that can accompany fading fame and the difficulties some actors face in adapting to an evolving industry. His contributions to the Western genre remain part of Hollywood's rich tapestry of classic cinema. Piatti Gig Young. Gig Young was an American actor celebrated for his charming and sophisticated on-screen persona. Born Byron Ellsworth Barr in St. Cloud, Minnesota, he adopted the stage name Gig Young after a role he played in The Gay Sisters. Young received critical acclaim, winning an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Despite professional success, Young struggled with personal demons, including alcoholism and failed marriages. On October 19, 1978, at the age of 64, Young and his fifth wife, Kim Schmidt, were found dead in their Manhattan apartment in New York City. Investigations concluded that Young had shot his 31-year-old wife before turning the gun on himself in an apparent murder-suicide. The tragic event occurred just weeks after their wedding and shocked the entertainment community. Factors contributing to the incident may have included Young's declining mental health, substance abuse, and career frustrations. His death serves as a stark reminder of the hidden struggles that individuals may face behind their public personas. 6. Philip Loeb. Philip Loeb was an American actor and educator known for his role as Jake Goldberg in the early television sitcom The Goldbergs. Born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Loeb was also a dedicated advocate for actors' rights and a member of the Actors' Equity Association. During the 1950s, Loeb's career was derailed by the Hollywood blacklist amid fears of communist influence in the entertainment industry. Accused of being a communist sympathizer during the McCarthy era, he was pressured to resign from the Goldbergs and struggled to find work thereafter. On September 1, 1955, at the age of 64, Loeb died by suicide in New York City's Taft Hotel, overdosing on sleeping pills. Loeb's death was a direct result of the professional ruin and personal despair caused by the blacklist. His story highlights the devastating impact of the Red Scare on individuals' lives and careers. Loeb's plight inspired the character Hecky Brown in the film The Front, bringing attention to this dark chapter in American history. 7. Carl Dane. Carl Dane was a Danish-American actor prominent during the silent film era. Born Rasmus Carl Thorkelsen Gottlieb in Copenhagen, Denmark, he emigrated to the United States and found success in Hollywood with roles in films like The Big Parade and The Son of the Sheik. His tall, lanky appearance and comedic talent made him a popular character actor. With the transition to sound films, Dane's thick accent became a barrier, and his career declined sharply. Facing financial hardship and personal humiliation, he attempted various jobs, including running a hot dog stand near the studio where he once worked as a star. On April 14, 1934, at the age of 47, Carl Dane died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in his Los Angeles apartment. His death highlighted the brutal impact of the industry's technological shifts on individual artists. Dane's story is a poignant example of how fame can be fleeting and how rapidly changing circumstances can lead to personal tragedy. 8. John Bowers. John Bowers was an American actor who achieved stardom during the silent film era. Born John E. Bowersox in Garrett, Indiana, he appeared in over 90 films, including notable works like Lorna Doone and Robin Hood with Douglas Fairbanks. With the advent of sound in cinema, Bowers' career faltered, and he found it difficult to secure roles. On November 17, 1936, at the age of 50, Bowers reportedly sailed into the Pacific Ocean from Santa Monica, California, in a small boat. His body was discovered washed ashore days later, and it was presumed that he had died by suicide. Legend has it that Bowers' despair over his fading career led to his final act. His story is often cited as an inspiration for the character Norman Maine in A Star is Born. Bowers' tragic end reflects the harsh realities faced by many silent film actors who struggled to adapt to the new era of talkies. 9. Paul Bern. Paul Bern was a German-born American film director, screenwriter, and producer at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. Born Paul Levy in Hamburg, Germany, he became a respected figure in Hollywood, known for his work behind the scenes. In July 1932, he married the rising star Jean Harlow. On September 5, 1932, at the age of 42, Byrne was found dead from a gunshot wound in his Beverly Hills home. A note was discovered, and his death was officially ruled a suicide. However, inconsistencies and the swift actions of MGM executives to manage the situation led to widespread speculation. Theories ranged from accidental death to murder, possibly involving Byrne's previous common-law wife, Dorothy Millette. The scandal surrounding Byrne's death was one of Hollywood's earliest and most enduring mysteries. It highlighted the lengths to which studios would go to protect their stars and investments. The true circumstances remain unclear, but the event significantly impacted those involved, especially Jean Harlow. Gishanti Max Linder. Max Linder was a pioneering French actor, director, and producer who became one of the first international film stars. Born Gabriel Maximilien Leviel in Saint-Loubès, France, he created the character Max, a dapper gentleman whose comedic escapades influenced future legends like Charlie Chaplin. Linder's career was interrupted by World War I, during which he was injured and suffered from health issues, including depression and the effects of gas exposure. Despite attempts to revive his career post-war, he struggled with personal demons. On October 31, 1925, at the age of 41, Max Linder and his wife, Helene Peters, died in a suicide pact in a Paris hotel room. They left behind their 15-month-old daughter. The couple ingested a lethal dose of barbiturates and made cuts to their wrists. Linder's suicide was a culmination of his ongoing battles with mental health and the pressures of his profession. His death was a significant loss to early cinema, marking the end of a trailblazing career. 11th, George Sanders. George Sanders was a British actor renowned for his suave and cynical screen persona. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia, to British parents, Sanders moved to England after the Russian Revolution. He starred in films such as Rebecca, All About Eve, for which he won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and The Picture of Dorian Gray. On April 25, 1972, at the age of 65, Sanders was found dead in a hotel room in Castelldefels, Spain. He had overdosed on barbiturates, and a suicide note expressed his weariness with life. Sanders had been suffering from dementia and declining health, which contributed to his decision. His death brought attention to issues of aging and mental health among actors. Sanders' eloquent farewell reflected his characteristic wit and detachment. His distinguished career left a lasting impact on cinema, with performances that continue to be celebrated. 12th, Charles Boyer. Charles Boyer was a French-American actor famous for his romantic roles in films like Algiers, Gaslight, and Love Affair. Born in Figeac, France, Boyer became a major Hollywood star and was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. On August 26, 1978, just 2 days before his 79th birthday, Boyer died by suicide in Phoenix, Arizona, ingesting a lethal dose of barbiturates. His wife of 44 years, British actress Pat Patterson, had died from cancer only days earlier on August 24th. Overcome with grief, Boyer chose to end his life rather than live without her. Their long and devoted marriage was well known in Hollywood. Boyer's death underscored the profound impact of personal loss and the complexities of coping with bereavement. His legacy as a leading man of classic cinema remains influential. Trzynasty Pete Duell. Pete Duell was an American actor recognized for his role as Hannibal Hayes in the television series Alias Smith and Jones. Born Peter Elstrom Duell in Rochester, New York, he began his career in theater and transitioned to television and film. On December 31, 1971, at the age of 31, Duell died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his Hollywood Hills home in Los Angeles. His girlfriend, Diane Ray, was present in the house at the time. Duell had been struggling with depression and alcohol abuse and had a prior arrest for driving under the influence. His sudden death shocked fans and colleagues. The producers of Alias Smith and Jones decided to continue the show with a different actor. Duell's passing highlighted the pressures of fame and the importance of mental health support for individuals in the entertainment industry. 14. Brian Keith. Brian Keith was an American actor whose career spanned over 6 decades. Born Robert Alba Keith in Bayonne, New Jersey, he starred in films like The Parent Trap and television series such as Family Affair. On June 24, 1997, at the age of 75, Keith died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his Malibu home in California. He had been diagnosed with lung cancer and emphysema, causing severe health problems. Additionally, his daughter Daisy had died by suicide in April of the same year. Keith's death was a culmination of physical suffering and emotional pain from personal loss. His passing drew attention to the struggles faced by individuals dealing with chronic illness and grief. His contributions to film and television are remembered fondly by audiences. 15th, Richard Farnsworth. Richard Farnsworth was an American actor and stuntman whose career began in the 1930s. Born in Los Angeles, California, he worked as a stuntman before transitioning to acting. Farnsworth earned Academy Award nominations for Comes a Horseman and The Straight Story. On October 6, 2000, at the age of 80, Farnsworth died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his ranch in Lincoln, New Mexico. He was suffering from terminal metastatic prostate cancer, which caused excruciating pain and limited his mobility. Farnsworth's decision to end his life was influenced by his desire to avoid further suffering. His death highlighted issues related to terminal illness, pain management, and the choices faced by those with severe health conditions. Farnsworth's legacy includes a body of work that exemplifies authenticity and dedication to his craft. 16th, John Hall. John Hall was an American actor known for his roles in adventure films during the 1930s and 1940s. Born Charles Felix Locker in Fresno, California, he starred in movies like The Hurricane and Arabian Nights. On December 13, 1979, at the age of 64, Hall died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his North Hollywood home in Los Angeles. He had been diagnosed with incurable bladder cancer, leading to significant pain and declining health. Hall's death was a response to his terminal diagnosis and the suffering he was experiencing. His passing brought attention to the personal challenges faced by individuals coping with severe illness. Hall's contributions to cinema, particularly in the adventure genre, remain part of Hollywood's classic era.
Did Hollywood's golden glow come from stolen gold? Between 1930 and 1955, at least $12 million in hush money settlements, injunctions, and jury awards silenced claims that blockbuster tunes and Oscar bait scripts were cribbed line for line from unknown writers. One Joan Crawford hit is still illegal to screen. A 4-note TV theme paid rival composers for decades. And the superhero, who once outsold Superman, was erased by a single verdict. Tonight, we're cracking open 21 buried lawsuits to reveal how plagiarism scandals rewrote, sometimes literally, the history of classic Hollywood. Letty Linton. Picture 1936. Broadway lawyers sending telegrams to MGM's Culver City lot. Cease exhibition. Play is ours. Edward Sheldon and Margaret Ayer Barnes believed the studio's melodrama, Letty Linton, lifted entire scenes from their 1930 play, Dishonored Lady. They sued, won in 1939, and the Second Circuit affirmed. MGM never appealed to the Supreme Court. Instead, it quietly yanked the Joan Crawford picture from distribution, forfeiting lucrative 16mm and TV syndication markets that later earned studios millions. Today, the only copies reside in vaults under a perpetual injunction, making Letty Linton Hollywood's most requested missing title. The judgment also set the modern, substantial similarity test. Judge Learned Hand held that even non-identical dialogue could infringe if the overall pattern of events matched. That doctrine is still quoted by Screenwriters Guild attorneys vetting pitches in 2025. MGM's loss, estimated at $2 million in withheld rentals, turned story department clearance from a courtesy into an insurance mandate across the industry. What makes this case particularly striking is that Letty Linton was a high-profile production with Joan Crawford at the height of her star power. The film received glowing reviews and strong box office returns before legal troubles emerged. Both the play and film were based on a 1925 novel by Marie Belloc Lowndes, itself inspired by a real Scottish murder case from 1857. But MGM had only secured rights to the novel, not the play, a distinction that would prove costly. The studio's legal team argued that any similarities stemmed from their common historical inspiration, but Judge Hand wasn't convinced, noting that specific scenes and plot developments appeared too similar to be coincidental. The ruling sent shockwaves through Hollywood script departments. Overnight, studios instituted rigorous clearance procedures, requiring detailed documentation of a story's origins and signed agreements from all potential rights holders. The industry had received an expensive lesson in the importance of thorough rights acquisition. The Ghost Ship. Few horror films have vanished as completely as Val Lewton's 1943 thriller, The Ghost Ship. Playwrights Samuel Golding and Norbert Faulkner said the seafaring chiller mirrored their unproduced stage script, right down to the mute sailor witness. In February 1944, they filed suit. RKO pulled the movie after only 15 weeks in theaters, despite strong grosses. The picture stayed locked away until Turner Classic Movies cleared the rights in 1993, a half-century exile that cost RKO the entire television era's royalties. Court transcripts show RKO's own story. Analyst had flagged the script as too close, but was overruled to meet a release slot. The studio eventually settled for an undisclosed five-figure sum. Small change then. Gigantic in hindsight, given the lost syndication value. The Ghost Ship represented a rare setback for Lewton, whose atmospheric horror films like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie had been both critically acclaimed and commercially successful. What's particularly ironic about this case is that Lewton was known for elevating B-movie material through psychological subtlety rather than explicit frights. His distinctive style made the plagiarism claim all the more damaging to his reputation. Internal memos reveal that RKO executives initially dismissed the playwright's complaint as opportunistic, but changed their strategy after discovering their story department's earlier warning. The analyst's report specifically noted concerning parallels in character development and nautical setting. But production had already begun when the warning reached upper management. Rather than risk a protracted legal battle, RKO opted to bury the film entirely, a decision that saved short-term legal costs but sacrificed decades of potential revenue. Son of Lassie. In an Ottawa courtroom in October 1947, freelance writer John Charles Reed demanded $200,000 from MGM, claiming the canine sequel Son of Lassie copied his wartime short story Candy. Jurors watched both works projected side by side before concluding that only the idea of a dog lost behind enemy lines was shared. An unprotectable theme. MGM's victory kept the film in circulation, but legal fees topped $40,000, almost 15% of the picture's production budget. Reed's defeat signaled to publishers that mere plot premises were weak ammunition, steering future plaintiffs toward more detailed claims, dialogue, scene order, or melody lines. The case hinged on the distinction between ideas and expression, a cornerstone of copyright law. Reed's attorney argued passionately that specific narrative beats had been lifted: a parachute jump behind enemy lines, the dog's separation from its master, and eventual reunion. However, MGM's legal team successfully demonstrated that these elements flowed naturally from the premise itself, and that the specific dialogue, characterization, and visual execution were entirely original. Film dailies from the production revealed that director S. Sylvan Simon had extensively storyboarded the adventure sequences before Reed's story had even been submitted to MGM's story department. This timeline evidence proved crucial in establishing independent creation. The studio also produced development materials showing that the screenplay evolved directly from the first Lassie film, following the natural logic of sending the famous collie into a wartime setting, as America was deeply engaged in World War II. Bercovici versus Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin strode into federal court in 1947 to answer playwright Conrad Bercovici's charge that the great dictator stole his 5-page outline about a barber mistaken for a tyrant. Despite a blizzard of affidavits, Chaplin chose settlement over testimony, paying $95,000, roughly $1.3 million today. Trade papers seized on the payout as tacit admission, tarnishing the Little Tramp's progressive halo, just as McCarthy-era pressures mounted. The case's real legacy is contractual. United Artists inserted chain-of-title warranties, requiring filmmakers to indemnify distributors, a clause still boilerplate in 2025 streaming deals. What made this case particularly striking was Chaplin's stature in the industry. As one of cinema's founding geniuses and a fiercely independent filmmaker who maintained control over his productions, the suggestion that he would appropriate another's concept seemed almost heretical. However, evidence uncovered during discovery revealed that Bercovici and Chaplin had indeed met multiple times in 1938 to discuss potential film ideas, including one centered on mistaken identity in a totalitarian state. Chaplin's decision to settle rather than continue litigation came amidst mounting political pressure. His left-leaning politics were already drawing scrutiny from the House Un-American Activities Committee, and a protracted plagiarism trial would only have intensified this unwanted attention. Some historians suggest the settlement was as much a political calculation as a legal one. The financial implications extended beyond the immediate payment. United Artists, worried about similar claims against other productions, began requiring extensive documentation of a project's creative genesis. Studios implemented submission release forms that potential contributors had to sign before executives would even look at their material, a practice that continues to frustrate aspiring screenwriters today. Alexander's Ragtime Band, 1938. "Roll the ragtime" was Irving Berlin's rally cry, until writer Marie Cooper Dieckhaus alleged the film lifted her unpublished 1937 novel. A federal judge agreed in 1944, awarding her $22,500 plus a share of profits, only for the Ninth Circuit to reverse in 1946, citing insufficient similarity. The initial verdict had already frozen foreign prints and stalled a radio adaptation, costing Fox an estimated $300,000. Berlin publicly framed the reversal as vindication. Yet studio correspondence shows new projects undergoing unprecedented plagiarism sweeps, timestamps, chain of receipt logs, and sworn reader reports. The case created a temporary panic at 20th Century Fox, where executives feared that a wave of similar claims might follow. Internal memos from Darrell F. Zanuck instructed the legal department to scrutinize all source materials for upcoming productions and establish clear documentation for every story element. This procedural overhaul proved prescient, as the post-war years saw an increase in copyright litigation targeting successful studio productions. What complicated the case was that Berlin's music had been integrated into a fictional narrative created specifically for the film. Dieckhaus claimed the story of a bandleader who rises to fame, loses his love, and finds redemption through music had been lifted directly from her manuscript Love and Glory, which she had submitted to Fox in late 1936. The initial ruling sent shockwaves through the industry, as it suggested that even broad narrative arcs could be protected by copyright. The reversal by the Ninth Circuit clarified that while specific expressions deserved protection, basic storylines remained in the public domain. Nevertheless, the 2-year legal battle made studios exceedingly cautious about developing projects based on unsolicited submissions, creating barriers for outsiders trying to break into the industry. Superman versus Captain Marvel. Blink and comics history changes. In 1939, Fawcett Publications launched Captain Marvel, who outsold Superman by 1941. Then, National Comics sued, calling the Shazam-powered hero a caped clone. Litigation dragged on until 1951, when Fawcett, drained by $400,000 in legal bills, settled, paid $400,000 in damages, and agreed to retire Captain Marvel. DC later licensed him back, but the 12-year saga chilled superhero creativity and birthed modern trademark policing inside comic editorial offices. The settlement's scale, roughly $4.8 million today, made law firm partners out of junior associates and coined the phrase super lawyers in Variety's columns. What made this dispute particularly fascinating was that Captain Marvel had evolved into a distinctive character with his own mythology and supporting cast. Unlike many imitators who quickly disappeared from newsstands, the Big Red Cheese developed a unique tone that was more whimsical and fantasy-oriented than Superman's science fiction adventures. Sales figures showed Captain Marvel comics outselling Superman by nearly 15% at their peak, creating genuine market competition. The case centered on both visual and narrative similarities. A cape-wearing strongman with a civilian identity, capable of flight and possessing super strength. DC's attorneys methodically documented every parallel between the characters, producing comparison boards showing similar poses, powers, and story beats. Fawcett countered by highlighting the magical rather than science fiction origin of their hero, and the distinctive supporting characters like Talking Tiger Mr. Tawny. The protracted legal battle transformed how comics companies approached character creation. Editors began requiring artists to document their design process, maintain dated sketches, and provide written rationales for superhero powers and costumes. Characters that might appear too derivative were redesigned or abandoned entirely. This caution stifled creativity at a time when superhero comics were already losing market share to horror and crime genres. Ossessione. Luchino Visconti's 1943 Ossessione predated MGM's authorized version of James M. Cain's The Postman Always Rings Twice by 3 years. Cain's agents filed in Rome. The Italian producers capitulated, paying a modest settlement, but delaying U.S. release until 1976 due to rights entanglements. Film historians lament the lost decades, noting Visconti's negative survived wartime only to languish in legal limbo. Cain expanded his lawsuit earnings into a Malibu beach house, joking in letters that plagiarism built the porch. The international dimension of this case revealed how copyright enforcement could cross borders even during world conflict. Visconti, working under fascist censorship in Italy, had obtained an Italian translation of Cain's novel without securing adaptation rights. He transformed the American noir tale into a distinctly Italian story, infused with neo-realist techniques that would later define post-war Italian cinema. Critics, who have studied both films, note that Visconti's version contains a raw sensuality and social commentary absent from MGM's more sanitized 1946 adaptation. The legal complications were exacerbated by wartime conditions, with communication between Hollywood and European film industries severely restricted. By the time regular contact resumed after 1945, MGM had already completed production on their official adaptation, starring Lana Turner and John Garfield. The studio was determined to protect their significant investment by blocking any competing version from entering the American market. The case established important precedents for international copyright enforcement and demonstrated how cultural works could be effectively censored through legal channels rather than political ones. When Ossessione finally reached American audiences in the 1970s, it was hailed as a lost masterpiece, ironically generating renewed interest in Cain's original novel. Dragnet's four-note motif. TV viewers know the stern four-note Dragnet signature, but composer Miklos Rosa said he wrote it first for the 1946 noir, The Killers. When Walter Schumann's theme hit airwaves in 1951, Rosa threatened suit. NBC split royalties rather than face a jury hummable comparison. Industry trades pegged the settlement at $10,000 a year, steady income that funded Raza's Beverly Hills pool. Musicologists cite the dispute whenever motif length is debated. 4 notes, it seems, can generate 4 years of litigation memos. This case exposed a fascinating gray area in musical copyright. How few notes constitute protectable expression? The distinctive dum-da-dum-dum pattern had become instantly recognizable to radio and television audiences, effectively functioning as Dragnet's sonic logo. When Raza heard it, he immediately recognized similarities to the ominous 4-note phrase he had composed to accompany Burt Lancaster's first appearance in The Killers. NBC's decision to settle revealed networks' growing awareness of music's commercial value in the television age. The Dragnet theme wasn't just background music. It was a marketing tool that helped build one of television's first blockbuster franchises. Each week, millions of Americans could identify the show from its signature sound alone, making the theme as valuable as any visual element. The resolution established an important precedent for composer compensation in the emerging television industry. Rather than a one-time payment for work for hire, composers could potentially claim ongoing royalties for distinctive musical elements that became part of a show's identity. This principle would later expand to cover various sonic signatures across broadcast media, from the NBC chimes to the HBO static intro. Rum and Coca-Cola. Trinidad Calypsonian, Lord Invader, and bandleader Lionel Belasco proved in 1946 that the Andrews Sisters' smash Rum and Coca-Cola borrowed heavily from their 1906 melody L'année passée. The federal court awarded Caribbean plaintiffs future U.S. royalties, worth about $150,000 by 1955, while comedian Maury Amsterdam kept the copyright to his English-language lyrics. The split copyright became a case study in derivative work doctrine. The sisters kept singing the hit on radio, but every spin now funneled pennies to Port of Spain, a rare reversal of cultural cash flow in that era. This case highlighted the often exploitative relationship between American popular music and Caribbean musical traditions. Lord Invader had performed his calypso about American soldiers' impact on Trinidad during the war years, only to hear a sanitized version become a major hit in the United States without credit or compensation. The original lyrics offered a pointed critique of American military presence, while Amsterdam's version transformed it into a cheerful tourist postcard. The legal proceedings revealed how Amsterdam had encountered the song while entertaining troops in the Caribbean, scribbled down the melody, and later claimed it as his own composition back in the States. Music publishers Decca Records had failed to conduct even basic research into the song's origins before releasing what became one of the Andrews Sisters' biggest hits, selling over 1 million copies. The case established important precedents for the protection of folk traditions and indigenous music against commercial exploitation. It demonstrated that, even without formal copyright registration, creators from less powerful nations could assert rights over their cultural contributions when appropriated by American entertainment companies. The court's decision to split copyright between melody and new lyrics created a template for handling similar cases where original material had been adapted or modified. Arnstein v. Porter. Say the name Ira Arnstein in music law class and watch eyes roll. His 1946 appeal against Cole Porter alleged 10 stolen tunes, including Begin the Big Wine. He lost, but Judge Frank's opinion created the 2-step infringement test: access plus substantial similarity, judged by an ordinary listener, not a musically trained ear. That framework still anchors jury instructions nationwide. Porter's legal expenses topped $40,000. His diary quips, paid for the verdict in champagne. Arnstein remains one of the most influential plaintiffs in copyright history, despite losing virtually every case he brought. A moderately successful composer in the early 20th century, he developed an obsession with the idea that famous songwriters were stealing his unpublished works. He filed dozens of lawsuits against the biggest names in American music, including Irving Berlin, Ira Gershwin, and ultimately Cole Porter. What makes the Porter case significant is Judge Jerome Frank's careful articulation of how music plagiarism should be evaluated. Rather than relying solely on technical analysis of notation, Frank emphasized that music is an art meant to be heard, not merely read. Therefore, the ultimate test must be how the compositions sound to average listeners, the very audience for whom music is created. This principle revolutionized music copyright litigation, shifting power away from expert witnesses with academic credentials toward jury members representing typical consumers. Porter testified that he had never heard of Arnstein or his compositions, making the access prong of the test impossible to satisfy. However, the case established that even without direct evidence of access, if similarities were striking enough to preclude coincidence, a jury could infer that copying had occurred. This striking similarity doctrine continues to play a crucial role in cases where direct evidence of access is difficult to establish. Arnstein v. Broadcast Music, Inc. Earlier, in 1942, Arnstein targeted BMI and 21 song pluggers, claiming a raft of Tin Pan Alley hits echoed his unpublished pieces. Judge Knox dismissed for lack of concrete melody overlap, foreshadowing modern demands for forensic musicology. The ruling saved BMI from an injunction that could have silenced jukeboxes nationwide during wartime morale drives. Arnstein, representing himself, filed paperwork so voluminous the clerk's office gave him a dedicated cart, a trivia nugget cited in copyright seminars. This ambitious legal assault represented perhaps the broadest plagiarism claim ever filed against the music industry. Broadcast Music Inc. had been formed in 1939 as a competitor to ASCAP, and Arnstein's lawsuit threatened its very existence during its formative years. His complaint alleged a vast conspiracy among music publishers, radio networks, and composers to systematically plunder his creative output while denying him rightful recognition and compensation. What made this case particularly challenging was the sheer volume of comparisons Arnstein demanded the court evaluate. He submitted dozens of his own compositions alongside popular hits, often highlighting brief phrases or chord progressions that he claimed constituted theft. Judge Knox's opinion established an important limiting principle. Trivial similarities in short musical phrases, especially those consisting of common or trite passages, cannot sustain a finding of infringement. The case occurred against the backdrop of America's entry into World War II, when popular music played a crucial role in maintaining civilian and military morale. An injunction against BMI would have removed thousands of songs from radio airplay and public performance during a national crisis. This context likely influenced the court's reluctance to entertain Arnstein's more speculative claims without concrete evidence. Arnstein v. 20th Century Fox. Undeterred, Arnstein sued Fox in 1943 over "I've Got a Gal" in Kalamazoo. Judge Rifkind noted only 8 common notes in sequence, tossing the case and warning against creative grave robbing of the courts. Fox nevertheless began archiving submission logs, the ancestor of today's digital timestamping. Studio ledgers show $12,000 spent on depositions, more than the song's original commission fee. This case focused on one of the biggest hits from the 1942 film Orchestra Wives, performed by Glenn Miller and his orchestra. The upbeat swing number had become a nationwide sensation, and Arnstein claimed it plagiarized his unpublished composition, Kalamazoo Blues. Beyond the shared reference to the Michigan city, Arnstein pointed to a specific 8-note sequence that appeared in both works. Judge Rifkin's dismissal helped establish the principle that brief musical phrases, even when identical, may not constitute actionable copying if they represent common musical building blocks. His colorful admonition against using courts for creative grave robbing reflected growing judicial frustration with what were perceived as opportunistic claims against commercially successful works. Despite winning the case, 20th Century Fox implemented new protective measures for handling musical submissions. The studio began requiring all incoming musical material to be logged, dated, and officially acknowledged, creating a paper trail that could definitively establish when the studio had first encountered a particular melody or lyric. This bureaucratic innovation spread throughout the industry, eventually evolving into the sophisticated digital rights management systems used today. God Bless America. Irving Berlin debuted God Bless America in 1938, and almost instantly, folk historians pointed to Baptist hymns and mountain songs with similar contours. No lawsuit ever landed, but the chatter persisted, leading Berlin to donate all royalties to the Boy Scouts to diffuse criticism. The song has since generated over $10 million for the Scouts. Musicologists still debate whether the opening leap mirrors the 19th century hymn and evening prayer, keeping the controversy alive in academic journals. Berlin's patriotic anthem emerged as America watched Europe descend into war, quickly becoming a second unofficial national anthem. The composer had actually written an early version during World War I, then shelved it, revising and introducing it 20 years later, as fascism threatened Europe. When folk music scholars began noting similarities to existing religious melodies, Berlin found himself in an uncomfortable position. The nation's leading Jewish songwriter, accused of appropriating Christian hymns for a song rapidly becoming a patriotic touchstone. Rather than defend himself legally or publicly, Berlin made a savvy decision that transformed potential criticism into positive publicity. By directing all royalties to the Boy Scouts of America, an organization embodying traditional American values, he effectively insulated the song from further scrutiny. The gesture was both generous and strategic, associating God Bless America with wholesome youth development rather than commercial gain. The ongoing academic debate about the song's melodic origins highlights how copyright issues intersect with the folk process through which communal music evolves. Many patriotic and religious songs build upon familiar melodic patterns, precisely because familiarity aids communal singing and emotional resonance. Berlin's composition exists in this gray area between original creation and cultural inheritance, a space that copyright law struggles to clearly define. Happy Birthday in As Thousands Cheer, 1934. When Irving Berlin's topical review inserted 2 bars of Happy Birthday to You, composer Jessica Hill sued for $250 per performance, about $5,100 today. Producers settled, and the Hill sisters registered copyright in 1935, turning the classroom ditty into the most lucrative song of the 20th century, earning an estimated $50 million before a 2016 court invalidated the lyrics' copyright. The 1934 dust-up also scared Hollywood into avoiding birthday scenes unless the characters sang off-key or hummed. This seemingly minor incident had profound implications for how a simple melody became a corporate asset through aggressive copyright enforcement. The Hill sisters, Mildred and Patty, had composed Good Morning to All as kindergarten teachers in 1893. The Happy Birthday lyrics emerged through oral tradition, with unclear authorship. However, when Jessica Hill, sister of the composers, noticed the familiar tune in Berlin's Broadway show, she initiated legal action that would transform copyright history. After settling with Berlin's production, Warner Chappell Music eventually acquired the rights in 1988 for $25 million and began rigorously collecting licensing fees. Filmmakers, restaurants, and even community gatherings faced potential liability for unauthorized performances. The song generated approximately $2 million annually in licensing revenue, remarkable for a composition consisting of just 6 notes and 16 words. The copyright's validity went unchallenged until filmmaker Jennifer Nelson filed a class action lawsuit in 2013, arguing that the copyright covered only specific piano arrangements, not the song itself. In 2016, after examining historical evidence, Judge George King ruled that Warner/Chappell had never properly acquired the rights to the lyrics. The company agreed to reimburse $14 million in licensing fees and place the song in the public domain, ending decades of what many considered legal overreach. Somewhere over the rainbow. In March 2024, a Utah pianist uploaded a 1910 waltz that shares a near-identical octave leap and descending line with Harold Arlen's 1939 classic, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Scholars revived plagiarism allegations, but the Arlen estate notes no litigation was ever filed, and the Wizard song entered U.S. public domain only in 2035. Streaming spikes proved controversy still sells. Downloads of the original jumped 37% that week. The rediscovery highlights how even public domain finds can rattle century-old reputations. This contemporary controversy demonstrates how digital technology and social media have transformed copyright discussions. The pianist's video comparison went viral, garnering millions of views as viewers could easily hear the similarity between the opening phrases of both compositions. Music theorists quickly weighed in, some arguing that the distinctive octave leap, followed by a descending melodic line, constituted the heart of Arlen's composition, while others pointed out that such intervals are common in Western music. Arlen composed the song for The Wizard of Oz in 1939, nearly 3 decades after the obscure waltz had been published. No evidence suggests he ever encountered the earlier piece, raising questions about unconscious influence versus coincidental similarity, a distinction that remains murky in copyright law. The case also highlights how works abandoned to obscurity can resurface generations later through digital archives and create new legal questions. The controversy sparked renewed interest in the boundaries between inspiration and infringement in an era when algorithms can analyze millions of musical patterns to detect similarities. Some legal scholars argued that if such a claim had been brought during Arlen's lifetime, it might have succeeded under the access plus substantial similarity test, potentially changing film music history. The case remains hypothetical, but illustrates how copyright discussions continue to evolve in the digital age. Alexander's Ragtime Band. Long before the film case, critics noticed Irving Berlin's 1911 breakout hit resembled motifs in Scott Joplin's unpublished opera, Treemonisha. Joplin never sued, but Library of Congress archivists keep noting the 4-note pickup. The debate feeds conferences on cultural appropriation, underscoring how copyright duration can outlive its architects. Berlin dismissed questions with a quip, "It's all on the upbeat." The phrase became shorthand for deflecting theft claims. This controversy touches on the racial dynamics of early 20th century American music. Berlin, a Russian Jewish immigrant, rose to become America's most successful songwriter, while Joplin, despite his innovations in ragtime, died in relative obscurity in 1917. Questions about whether Berlin appropriated elements of Joplin's work reflect broader patterns of white composers commercializing musical innovations from black artists. Musicologists have identified specific phrases in Alexander's Ragtime Band that echo passages in Joplin's compositions, particularly the distinctive 4-note pickup figure that gives the song its rhythmic energy. While the melodic lines diverge after this introduction, the similarity was striking enough to generate controversy, even in 1911 when Berlin's song became a national sensation, selling over 1 million copies of sheet music. What makes this case historically significant is that it occurred before the establishment of many modern copyright protections. Joplin, already struggling with the progressive effects of syphilis and focused on gaining recognition for his opera, lacked the resources and possibly the legal standing to pursue claims against Berlin's powerful publishers. The continued academic interest in this century-old controversy demonstrates how copyright disputes often serve as proxies for larger discussions about cultural power, attribution, and the evolution of musical traditions. M. C. A. V. Wilson. The off-Broadway review, Let My People Come, featured the cunnilingus champion of Company C, a body send-up of Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. MCA sued. In 1981, the Second Circuit affirmed $325,000 in damages, ruling the song was not a parody because it mocked sexual mores, not the original work. The opinion narrowed fair use defenses for musical satire until Campbell vs. Acuff Rose reset the bar in 1994. Producers added a 15% ticket surcharge to cover the judgment, a reminder that infringement can hit audiences in the wallet. This case explored the boundaries between parody and satire. The musical revue, Let My People Come, had opened in 1974 as an explicit response to the sexual revolution, featuring nudity and frank discussions of sexuality. Its adaptation of the Andrews Sisters' wartime hit replaced the original lyrics about a talented military musician with explicit sexual content while maintaining the recognizable melody. The Second Circuit's ruling established a critical distinction. True parody must comment on or criticize the original work itself, not merely use the original's familiarity to comment on external social issues. Because Cunnilingus Champion didn't critique Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, but instead used its musical framework to comment on sexual taboos, it couldn't claim parody's fair use protection. This narrow interpretation of parody had significant implications for comedians, satirists, and musical performers throughout the 1980s. Many comedy albums and live performances began including disclaimer notices about unauthorized parodies, and some publishers became hesitant to release satirical works without obtaining licenses. The restrictive standard persisted until the Supreme Court's 1994 decision in Campbell vs. Acuff Rose, which established a more flexible approach to transformative uses. Old Eli v. Disney. Composer Joe Hauer circulated college song Old Eli and argued Disney's 1937 ballad Someday My Prince Will Come rode the same chord rise and interval leap. Musicologists hired by Disney charted 28 specific divergences in rhythm, harmony, and melodic contour. When presented with this forensic musical analysis, Hauer's representatives initially retreated, but settlement talks continued sporadically throughout 1940. What few realized was that another claimant lurked in the wings. Writer Jack Allen had been tracking the dispute through industry contacts and preparing his own claim based on similar allegations. Disney's victory against Hauer proved merely the first round in a protracted defense of their signature princess ballad. The episode illuminates how early copyright threats often function as reconnaissance, with initial claimants sometimes serving as unwitting pathfinders for subsequent litigation. First bite theory, as studio attorneys later dubbed it, became a recognized pattern in Hollywood copyright defense strategy. According to internal documents later obtained by Mouseplanet magazine, Disney's legal response established protocols that transformed studio practices. Beginning in 1941, all unsolicited musical submissions received formal intake documentation, with A&R staff required to note rejection dates and reasons. This rudimentary tracking evolved into today's sophisticated digital rights management system at Disney, where every creative interaction with outside parties generates a permanent audit trail. Frank Churchill, the actual composer of Someday My Prince Will Come, maintained detailed composition journals showing the song's evolution through 12 drafts, documentation that would prove crucial when the dispute reignited a year later. The studio began requiring all staff composers to maintain similar records, a practice that spread throughout the industry and continues in modified form today. Darrell v. Joe Morris Music. Songwriter Jack Darrell claimed, "On the beach at Bali Bali, swiped 8 notes from his novelty, Does Anybody Want a Little Cupid?" When the case reached the Second Circuit in 1940, Judge Clark revolutionized music copyright by distinguishing between original expression and stock musical devices. His opinion noted that tropical theme songs necessarily employed similar exotic intervals and rhythmic patterns that originated in Indonesian gamelan music. elements no Western composer could legitimately claim as original. The ruling established that certain musical building blocks, descending minor thirds in exotic contexts, particular percussion patterns, or pentatonic scales, belong to the public domain, regardless of who first incorporated them into a commercial composition. This principle of savoir-faire in music paralleled similar doctrines already established in literature and drama. What makes this case particularly interesting is its unexpected commercial aftermath. Despite losing his legal claim, Darrell experienced a 12% increase in his song's royalty payments during the litigation period. Music publishers noted the phenomenon in industry correspondence, observing that courthouse steps can substitute nicely for radio promotion. This early example of controversy marketing, generating publicity through legal conflict, established a pattern that savvy composers would occasionally exploit in subsequent decades. The George Washington University Law Review later identified Darrell as the first case to systematically catalog unprotectable musical cliches, a concept now foundational in music copyright litigation. Modern cases involving samples, interpolations, and melodic similarities still cite Judge Clark's distinction between protectable creative expression and unprotectable stock devices, making this seemingly obscure tropical tune dispute one of music law's most influential precedents. Davila v. Harms. Joseph Davila waited 12 years before claiming Sigmund Romberg's operetta. The Desert Song plagiarized his 1918 composition, If I Were a Spider and You Were My Fly. By 1940, Romberg had become one of Broadway's most successful composers, with his works adapted into major Hollywood productions. The delayed claim arrived just as Warner Brothers prepared a film adaptation, timing that raised judicial eyebrows. Judge Mandelbaum dismissed the case with unusual rhetorical flourish, introducing the doctrine of laches to music copyright. His opinion scathingly observed that a composer who sleeps on his rights for 12 years, while a composition achieves international acclaim, cannot suddenly awaken when the cinema rights are sold. The bench slap continued with a pointed dissection of Davila's credibility, noting he had demonstrated remarkable indifference to listening to other compositions, yet claimed detailed recall of his own obscure work. The biting judicial tone, rare in copyright opinions, reflected growing frustration with opportunistic claims targeting successful works. Mandelbaum explicitly questioned whether Davila would have filed suit had the Desert Song remained obscure, suggesting that commercial success, rather than genuine similarity, motivated the complaint. Harms Music Company's records reveal the defense cost, approximately $9,000, a substantial investment, but one that yielded significant precedential value. The company's board minutes noted that establishing a strong locus defense was worth 3 times the settlement they rejected, as it deterred numerous threatened claims against their catalog in subsequent years. Legal blogs at George Washington University have tracked how the Davila precedent continues influencing modern litigation strategy, particularly in music publishing, where delays between composition and litigation often span decades. The case established that plaintiff inaction itself can become a viable defense, a principle that has protected countless compositions from belated claims. Allen versus Walt Disney. When Jack Allen finally filed his formal complaint in 1941, alleging "Someday My Prince Will Come" plagiarized Old Eli, Disney was prepared. Having already weathered Hauer's preliminary threats, the studio's legal team had assembled a comprehensive defense dossier, including Frank Churchill's original composition journals, witness statements from Snow White's production team, and expert analyses of both works. Judge Conger's methodical opinion broke new ground in how courts evaluated musical similarities. Rather than relying solely on expert testimony, Conger personally examined the lead sheets, noting that while both compositions contained rising sixth intervals, these appeared in different harmonic contexts and resolved through distinct melodic pathways. His conclusion that the works shared coincidental resemblances rather than piracy, established a higher standard for proving musical infringement. The written opinion became an oft-cited reference in subsequent decades, particularly for its clarification that mere suspicion cannot substitute for evidence of copying. Conger emphasized that similar musical ideas can emerge independently, especially when they employ common compositional devices like the major sixth leap that both songs featured, a phenomenon now recognized as coincidental convergence in musicology. Disney's meticulous documentation proved decisive. As noted in legal summaries published on Justia Law, Frank Churchill's unusual habit of drafting melodies directly to staff paper rather than working from a piano provided a clear creative timeline that contradicted Allen's claims. The studio subsequently instituted a formal composition documentation policy requiring all staff composers to preserve drafts and date each significant revision, a practice that saved the company millions in potential settlements over subsequent decades. The case also established the independent creation defense as a viable strategy even when similarities exist between works. By demonstrating Churchill's compositional process in detail, Disney showed that similar musical phrases could emerge without copying, a principle that remains central to music copyright defense strategy in the streaming era. If you've enjoyed peeling back these courtroom curtains, uncovering the figures, the filings, and the fortunes that changed hands, don't let the story fade to black. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join our crew for the next deep dive into film history's untold files. We've got reels of suppressed scandals and lost legends queued up, and you won't want to miss when the projector starts rolling. Got a favorite rumor we haven't covered? Or a vintage lawsuit you'd like unsealed? Drop it in the comments below. Your tip could be the headline of our next episode. Thanks for watching, and remember, in Hollywood, the loudest applause sometimes comes from the gavel. Did you know that during the golden age of Hollywood, many legends had brutal physical fights? Believe it or not, it was real. Errol Flynn, John Wayne, Clark Gable, and Marlon Brando all had physical altercations with other legends at some point in their careers. Today, we are going to talk about 15 of the most brutal fights that weren't just verbal, but turned physical as well. Robert Mitchum versus an unnamed director. Alleged incident. Robert Mitchum was the quintessential Hollywood bad boy. A relaxed, sardonic presence who never seemed to take stardom too seriously. He had a reputation for clashing with authority figures, thanks to his laid-back style and reluctance to follow anyone's rules. Among the whispers of Mitchum's off-screen escapades is a tale that he once got into a physical altercation with a director who criticized his performance as too detached. The specifics are murky, mostly because Mitchum was under contract with studios known for sweeping scandals under the rug. Some say this fight happened in the mid to late 1940s, when Mitchum's star was on the rise, but he was still forming his persona. The director, whose name rarely surfaces in accounts, was supposedly frustrated by Mitchum's calm, almost sleepy approach to scenes that demanded more energy. In front of the entire crew, the director may have called Mitchum lazy or unprofessional, provoking a very sharp reaction. Witnesses claim Mitchum confronted the director, warning him not to speak that way. When the director refused to back down, the actor either shoved him or grabbed him by the collar. There's even a rumor that Mitchum threw a punch, though no one seems to agree if it actually connected. Predictably, studio officials jumped in, urging everyone to keep quiet. Mitchum and the director were reportedly forced to shake hands and carry on as if nothing had happened. Because the studios had immense power over publicity, the story never fully emerged in mainstream press. Over the years, Mitchum would drop cryptic hints about not liking certain directors, but he never confirmed names or details. While the tale remains unverified, it perfectly fits Mitchum's rebellious mystique, a star who always walked the line between cool composure and smoldering anger, ready to ignite if pushed too far. Errol Flynn versus John Barrymore. Picture a lavish Hollywood party, where the drinks flow freely and laughter echoes in every room. This was the kind of atmosphere Errol Flynn and John Barrymore thrived in. Both men were known for their larger-than-life personalities. Flynn was the swashbuckling heartthrob with a mischievous grin, while Barrymore was the beloved stage-to-screen legend whose career was beginning to wane. One evening, as the story goes, Flynn, in a boisterous mood, made a few offhand jokes about Barrymore's fading star power and his aging looks. Barrymore, who prided himself on his thespian legacy, took offense. In the heat of the moment, with tempers stoked by alcohol, Barrymore reportedly aimed a punch straight at Flynn's jaw. Chaos followed. Some partygoers tried to intervene, while others watched in stunned silence as the two men wrestled around a room filled with priceless antiques. The scuffle didn't last long, but it was intense enough to leave both men breathless and disheveled. There were even claims of broken furniture and shattered glasses. Eventually, mutual friends managed to pry them apart before any serious damage was done, other than bruised egos and a few cuts and scrapes. Afterward, both actors supposedly downplayed the incident, laughing it off as a case of boys being boys. Whether this was genuine forgiveness or a way to keep the studio from reprimanding them is anyone's guess. Many people believe they recognized they were quite similar, hard-living men who enjoyed pushing the limits. Over time, the brawl took on a legendary status, often recounted in whispered Hollywood gossip circles. Some insist it was blown out of proportion, while others maintain it was every bit as dramatic as the actors themselves. In the end, the Flynn-Barrymore dust-up remains a fascinating glimpse into the off-screen drama that once rocked Tinseltown. Tallulah Bankhead versus Joan Crawford during Satan Met a Lady, 1936. Tallulah Bankhead was famous for her husky voice, quick wit, and no-holds-barred attitude. Joan Crawford, on the other hand, embodied old-school glamour and discipline. When these two icons ended up in the same orbit for Satan Met a Lady, a comedic version of the Maltese Falcon, nobody expected a cozy friendship. Bankhead was outspoken and liked to poke fun at Hollywood's pretensions, while Crawford was deadly serious about her image. Right from the start, Bankhead's free-spirited approach clashed with Crawford's insistence on near-perfect takes. The crew often felt a chilly undercurrent during their scenes together. Then came the day when Bankhead, exasperated by what she considered Crawford's diva behavior, outright slapped her. Accounts vary on what triggered the outburst. Some say Crawford made a snide remark about Bankhead's theatrical style, while others mention a disagreement over who deserved top billing. Regardless, Bankhead's hand met Crawford's cheek with enough force to stun everyone. Crawford, furious and humiliated, reportedly stormed off set. She later retaliated by trash-talking Bankhead to the studio heads, and in interviews, calling her amateurish and implying she was unprofessional. Bankhead, never one to hold her tongue, fired back with sarcastic barbs of her own. The tension got so thick that production schedules had to be juggled to keep the two apart as much as possible. Ultimately, Satan Met a Lady failed to make much of a mark at the box office, and the incident slipped into Hollywood legend. However, it remains a prime example of two formidable personalities clashing head-on. The rivalry never really cooled, as Crawford continued to disparage Bankhead for years. For fans, their showdown underscores just how combustible it can be when two strong-willed stars refuse to back down, proving that sometimes off-screen drama can eclipse anything that appears in the final cut. Humphrey Bogart versus William Holden, rumored incident during Invisible Stripes, 1939. Before William Holden became a major star in films like Sunset Boulevard and Bridge on the River Kwai, he was making his way through the studio system in smaller roles. One of his early films was Invisible Stripes, which also featured Humphrey Bogart in a supporting role. Bogart was still on the cusp of major stardom, but his tough guy persona was already well established. Stories circulated that during production, Bogart accused Holden of pulling a dangerous prank. According to one version, There was a motorcycle stunt in which Bogart believed Holden deliberately put him in harm's way, perhaps by failing to brake on time or steering too close. Bogart, who took personal safety seriously, confronted Holden about it right there on set. The conversation quickly turned heated, with Bogart accusing Holden of trying to kill him. Whether Holden intended any wrongdoing remains unclear. Many who knew him described him as easygoing and unlikely to plot such a thing. Still, the tension that day was palpable. Some say Bogart shoved Holden or tried to lunge at him before crew members held him back. Others recall harsh words, but deny any physical violence. In classic studio-era fashion, Warner Brothers swiftly swept any such rumors under the rug, issuing denials and pointing to the film's smooth production. Over time, both men went on to become screen legends, and no major grudge seems to have persisted between them. If anything, they occasionally crossed paths socially without incident. The rumor has lingered mostly because it's so tantalizing to imagine two icons nearly coming to blows over a motorcycle stunt. While the exact details may never be fully confirmed, the story adds another layer of myth to the Golden Age, a time when even minor accidents could lead to major drama on Hollywood sets. Errol Flynn versus Michael Curtiz on the set of The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1936. Imagine a high-pressure film set in the 1930s. Hundreds of extras in period military uniforms, massive horses galloping around, and a director known for demanding perfection. This was the world Errol Flynn stepped into when working with Michael Curtiz. Flynn was already riding high on his newfound fame, while Curtiz had a reputation for being strict and sometimes abrasive. Tensions had been simmering for weeks, fueled by grueling shoots under the hot sun, and disagreements over how certain action sequences should be filmed. Rumor has it that Curtiz would bark orders and criticize Flynn's every move, pushing the actor to his limits. Flynn, always quick-tempered and unafraid to speak his mind, would shoot back sarcastic remarks. One day, the confrontation escalated beyond words. Flynn, furious at Curtiz's constant berating, reportedly shoved the director. Curtiz, who was no shrinking violet, shoved him right back. The scuffle turned into a brief but serious tussle, with some accounts claiming Flynn grabbed Curtiz by the throat, and fists were raised. Crew members rushed in, prying them apart before it spiraled out of control. The production was halted momentarily. Studio executives hurriedly intervened, issuing a stern reminder that such behavior would not be tolerated. At least, not where the public could hear about it. Both men begrudgingly apologized and resumed filming. Despite the friction, they managed to complete the movie, which later became a classic adventure film. Over the years, Flynn would often recount stories of how tough Curtiz could be, describing him as a taskmaster who inspired both respect and irritation. Curtiz, for his part, acknowledged Flynn's star power, but found his off-screen antics exasperating. Their fight became one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes stories of Golden Age Hollywood, reminding everyone that on-set magic sometimes comes with real-life drama. Bette Davis versus Miriam Hopkins during Old Acquaintance, 1943. Long before Bette Davis crossed swords with Joan Crawford, she'd already locked horns with another formidable actress, Miriam Hopkins. Their feud dated back to the early 1930s, fueled by professional jealousy and personal suspicions. Rumor has it that Hopkins believed Davis had been romantically involved with her husband, director Anatole Litvak, or at least that Davis was overly friendly. Whether that was true or just gossip, it created a tense atmosphere whenever the two actresses found themselves on the same set. Fast forward to 1943, and Davis and Hopkins were cast in Old Acquaintance. On paper, the film was a perfect vehicle for two strong female leads. But behind the scenes, sparks flew from day one. Hopkins felt overshadowed by Davis's star status, and Davis thought Hopkins was a constant complainer. Their scenes together were brimming with real animosity that the camera couldn't help but capture. The most famous incident took place during a scene where Davis's character was supposed to shake Hopkins. Instead of a light, staged move, Davis allegedly grabbed Hopkins with all her might, rattling her until Hopkins's pearl necklace snapped. The pearls went flying across the set, an unplanned moment that stunned everyone present. Hopkins was reportedly furious, feeling it was more assault than acting. Davis, on the other hand, made no apologies. She believed the scene called for genuine emotion and that Hopkins's overreaction was just more proof of her rival's delicate ego. After filming wrapped, both actresses continued to snipe at each other in interviews. Although Old Acquaintance was well received, their on-screen chemistry was overshadowed by tales of their off-screen feud. Unlike some Hollywood rivalries that cooled over time, Davis and Hopkins never truly became friends. Their tumultuous relationship remains a testament to how personal rivalries can ignite some of the most memorable and explosive moments in classic cinema. Sophia Loren and Marlon Brando on the set of A Countess from Hong Kong, 1967. Here's an encounter that pulls back the curtain on a very different type of altercation. Less fists and more personal boundaries. Sophia Loren, the Italian screen goddess, was starring opposite Marlon Brando in Charlie Chaplin's final film, A Countess from Hong Kong. Brando, already established as a legendary actor, was also known for his unpredictable behavior on set. This time, the story centers on a moment that Loren found deeply uncomfortable. According to rumors, Brando had a habit of being overly tactile, placing his hands on Loren in ways she did not appreciate. Whether he meant it as flirtation or casual contact is unclear, but Loren was not having it. Already exasperated by Brando's personal quirks and the sometimes tense atmosphere on set, Loren allegedly decided to let him know exactly how she felt by blowing cigarette smoke right into his face. This incident wasn't a classic brawl, but it was a sharp, visible protest. One version claims Brando was leaning in too close for Loren's liking, so she exhaled a cloud of smoke that made him reel back. There may have been some heated words exchanged, though details vary. What's clear is that Loren's boundary-setting gesture got Brando's attention, and it reportedly put an end to his unwelcome approaches. Neither star seems to have spoken publicly in great detail about the incident, and official studio records remain silent on the matter. However, the rumor has endured, offering a glimpse into how even Hollywood legends grapple with on-set conflicts and personal respect. For fans, it's a reminder that behind the glamour, celebrities deal with everyday issues, like maintaining personal space, just like the rest of us. And while the film itself wasn't a huge success, stories of its behind-the-scenes tension continue to fascinate film buffs around the world. John Wayne versus Bruce Cabot, Around the Spoilers, 1942. Now, let's travel to the rugged sets of a Western action drama. John Wayne and Bruce Cabot were co-starring, and both brought a macho energy that could light up the screen. Off-camera, though, things were not so harmonious. Allegedly, their rivalry had been brewing for some time, fueled by ego clashes and perhaps some personal grudges. Some accounts say gambling debts were involved. Wayne, known for his strong sense of fair play, apparently suspected that Cabot wasn't exactly honest at the poker table. During a break in filming, a casual game of cards started. At first, it was all in good fun. Cigarette smoke swirling, laughter, and friendly banter. Then, Wayne noticed something that didn't sit right. Cabot was winning more than usual, and Wayne grew suspicious he was cheating. He made a direct accusation, which was met with an equally direct denial from Cabot. Words quickly escalated, and in the blink of an eye, Wayne's famous right hook came into play. Some say Cabot was knocked out cold. Others claim it was just a violent scuffle. The studio was horrified. Bad press could ruin a film's box office, so executives did their best to keep the fight under wraps. Publicly, they downplayed any feud between their leading men, insisting everything was just peachy on set. In private, Wayne and Cabot were asked to patch things up for the sake of the production. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed. Wayne was not one to hold lifelong grudges if a man offered a genuine apology or demonstrated better behavior. Although the details remain murky, due to the hush-hush nature of studio PR, most accounts agree the two men eventually reached a truce. By the time the film hit theaters, their fists had cooled, and they managed to keep the tension hidden behind Hollywood's polished curtain. Humphrey Bogart versus Howard Hawks on the set of To Have and Have Not, 1944. Humphrey Bogart, the definitive tough guy star, teamed up with director Howard Hawks for To Have and Have Not, a film famous for introducing Lauren Bacall to the world, and for some behind-the-scenes tension. Bogart was already riding the success of Casablanca, while Hawks had his own reputation for being a strong-willed visionary. Initially, they appeared to respect each other's talents, but differences in approach soon caused friction. Hawks liked to experiment with dialogue, encouraging improvisation to capture more naturalistic performances. Bogart, who had honed his craft in a more traditional studio system, sometimes found this approach frustrating, especially when he felt unprepared. Tensions grew as the two butted heads over how certain scenes should be delivered. Then came the fateful day when Hawks criticized Bogart's timing in front of the entire crew, calling it off. Bogart, who prided himself on precision, didn't appreciate the public dressing down. Things escalated after filming stopped for the day. Accounts differ on who threw the first punch, but most versions agree that voices were raised, and Bogart took a swing at Hawks. Hawks was no pushover, allegedly pushing Bogart back, leading to a brief scuffle. The film's producers quickly intervened, reminding them that the success of the movie hinged on their cooperation. Remarkably, after cooling off, both men seemed to realize that they brought out a certain magic in each other's work. To Have and Have Not became a hit, in no small part due to Bogart's on-screen chemistry with newcomer Bacall. Though the film is beloved today for its witty banter and romantic spark, it's also remembered for this altercation that brought real heat to the set. Hawks and Bogart eventually found common ground, working together again in future projects, proving that sometimes conflict can lead to surprising creative results. John Wayne versus Howard Hawks on the set of Red River, 1948. Picture this: a hot, dusty cattle trail, a movie set swarming with wranglers, livestock, and a crew struggling with tough outdoor conditions. John Wayne was already a star, but Red River was a new challenge that pushed him into playing a more complex, often unlikable character. Howard Hawks, the famed director, was equally determined to get every scene just right. Both men were headstrong, carrying towering reputations and a healthy dose of pride. As filming progressed, tensions brewed. Hawks demanded numerous takes for certain scenes involving complicated cattle drives, while Wayne, who prided himself on being a natural cowboy, believed they could get it in fewer takes. Rumors suggest their disagreements got personal, with each criticizing the other's judgment in front of the crew. Wayne might have felt Hawks was undermining his instincts, and Hawks, known for his sharp tongue, fired back with remarks about Wayne needing to act rather than just rely on his tough guy persona. At some point, a heated argument escalated beyond words. Though details vary, the general consensus is that Wayne took offense to Hawks publicly dressing him down in front of everyone. Wayne allegedly swung, or at least made a move to swing, at the director. Hawks, never one to cower, squared up in response. The crew quickly jumped in, separating the two before any real damage could occur. Despite the drama, the film was finished, and ironically, Red River became one of Wayne's most critically acclaimed performances. It showcased a depth to Wayne's acting that many believed was drawn out by Hawks's firm direction. After the dust settled, they apparently moved past the incident. They even worked together again on other movies, suggesting that while tempers flared on the trail, professionalism and the quest for cinematic excellence eventually won the day. Clark Gable versus Victor Fleming during Gone with the Wind, 1939. Welcome to the grand, sprawling set of Gone with the Wind. one of the most ambitious Hollywood productions of all time. Clark Gable was at the top of his game, cast as the charismatic Rhett Butler. Victor Fleming came in as the director who would, finally, bring order to the chaotic production. But the mammoth scope of the film created tremendous pressure. Long shooting days, multiple script rewrites, and an ever-demanding producer, David O. Selznick, made tempers flare behind the scenes. Gable, known as a consummate professional, had strong opinions about how his character should be portrayed. Fleming was a no-nonsense director who believed in giving firm instructions and expected them to be followed. As production wore on, disagreements over Rhett's dialogue and the film's emotional tone began to simmer. One particularly tense day, Gable felt Fleming was too harsh in his criticism, possibly barking orders in front of the cast and crew in a way Gable found embarrassing. In a rare flash of anger, Gable reportedly confronted Fleming, telling him in no uncertain terms to back off. Words turned to shouts, and according to some accounts, Gable took a swing. Fleming dodged, and the two men were quickly separated before a full-blown fistfight could occur. The altercation was brief, but shocking to anyone who thought of Gable as the ultimate gentleman. Studio executives, already jittery about the huge budget and production delays, were quick to smooth things over. They pulled Gable and Fleming aside, reminding them of the film's importance and the need to keep private affairs out of the headlines. In the end, both men shook hands and refocused on completing what would become a cinematic masterpiece. The public never got an official whiff of the scuffle, and Gone with the Wind went on to make movie history, overshadowing any behind-the-scenes drama. Clark Gable versus Spencer Tracy, on the set of San Francisco, 1936. Let's rewind to a bustling MGM soundstage. Elaborate sets, extras dressed in period costumes, and two of the biggest names in Hollywood sharing top billing. Clark Gable and Spencer Tracy had very different acting styles and personalities. Gable, often dubbed the King of Hollywood, brought undeniable star power and a distinct charm. Tracy was more understated, focusing on nuanced performances with a quiet intensity. When they came together for San Francisco, most people expected them to get along just fine. Both were known for their professionalism. However, as filming progressed, rumors began to swirl that Tracy felt overshadowed by Gable's magnetic screen presence. Gable, for his part, might have sensed Tracy's growing frustration and became somewhat protective of his own star status. The spark that ignited their altercation apparently happened over a scene where Tracy believed Gable wasn't giving him enough room to deliver his lines effectively. Gable, offended by the suggestion, shot back that Tracy was overthinking it. Words escalated into a shouting match, with crew members trying to calm them down. In the midst of the tension, Gable either shoved Tracy or threatened to do so. Accounts differ, but there was definitely some form of physical contact. Tracy, who wasn't one to be pushed around despite his calmer demeanor, might have shoved back. The scuffle was short-lived, but it left everyone on set stunned. MGM executives stepped in immediately, mindful of their stars' reputations and the film's potential success. Both men were told to keep their personal differences under wraps. Eventually, they managed to reconcile well enough to finish the movie without further incident. San Francisco went on to become a box office hit, and over time, the altercation faded from public memory, overshadowed by both actors' towering legacies in Hollywood history. Marlon Brando versus Frank Sinatra during Guys and Dolls, 1955. Here we have two titans of entertainment. Marlon Brando, the moody method actor who brought raw realism to his roles, and Frank Sinatra, the legendary crooner with a magnetic stage presence. From the start, sparks were bound to fly. Guys and Dolls put them together as co-leads, and each had strong opinions about how the film should be made. Brando's immersion in the method style, muttering lines, improvising, and taking extra takes, clashed with Sinatra's streamlined approach. Sinatra was used to hitting his marks quickly, delivering his performance, and moving on. Tension brewed throughout filming. Sinatra reportedly mocked Brando's method acting, labeling it pretentious, while Brando poked fun at Sinatra's inability to do more than one or two takes. Rumors suggest Brando even teased Sinatra's singing style on set, which was a surefire way to rile up old Blue Eyes. The real breaking point, however, is said to have occurred off-set in a nightclub. Some say Brando made a snide remark about Sinatra's musical talent, or perhaps his rumored connections to the underworld. Sinatra, who was famously short-tempered about such topics, threw a punch at Brando. Witnesses claim the scuffle was broken up almost instantly by bodyguards and friends. Brando might have swung back, or simply ducked. Stories differ. The studio, desperate to keep its two megastars from making headlines for all the wrong reasons, downplayed any talk of a fight. Publicly, both men shrugged it off. But the tension never truly went away. For years, they continued to trade subtle jabs in interviews. While they remained icons in their respective fields, their short-lived partnership in Guys and Dolls became notorious for backstage bickering that nearly stole the show. Even now, film fans debate who was in the right, but one thing's for sure. Brando and Sinatra together was a recipe for fireworks. Bette Davis versus Joan Crawford, during Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962. Talk about two titans of the silver screen. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford had a rivalry that was already legendary before they ever set foot on the set of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Davis was famed for her fiery performances and sharp wit, while Crawford was known for her glamorous image and iron will. By the time they teamed up for this psychological thriller, tensions were sky-high, with both women eager to assert dominance. According to lore, the animosity wasn't just in the script. It spilled into real life. Davis felt Crawford was a controlling presence, always maneuvering for more attention, while Crawford believed Davis was trying to overshadow her by any means necessary. They hurled insults whenever possible, and crew members often found themselves caught in the crossfire. Some days, it was a chilly silence. On others, it was full-throttle yelling matches. The physical altercations came in various forms. One well-known incident involved a scene where Davis, in character, was supposed to kick Crawford. Davis reportedly went full force, leaving Crawford bruised and furious. In another version, Crawford wore weights under her costume, so that when Davis had to drag her across the floor, she'd struggle painfully and be left with a sore back. Such acts of sabotage became part of the film's lore. Despite this on-set warfare, the movie turned out to be a critical and commercial success, perhaps fueled by the raw tension between the two stars. Publicly, they played it off as a professional rivalry that contributed to the film's intensity. Privately, however, the resentment continued long after filming wrapped. Today, their feud remains one of Hollywood's most infamous, proving that when two powerhouse personalities collide, the drama can outshine even the glitz of the silver screen. Bette Davis and Errol Flynn, during The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, 1939. Bette Davis was famous for her fiery temper and unwavering dedication to her craft. Errol Flynn, meanwhile, was the dashing swashbuckler of the silver screen, adored for his roguish charm. Put them together in a period drama about Queen Elizabeth I and the Earl of Essex, and you'd think sparks would fly on screen. They certainly did, but not only in the scripted scenes. From the outset, Davis had doubts about Flynn's casting. She felt he lacked the serious acting chops to match her intensity as the aging queen. Flynn, for his part, found Davis's perfectionism a bit stifling. Their backstage bickering finally erupted during a scene where Elizabeth was supposed to slap Essex. According to crew members, Davis didn't hold back. Rather than a staged, gentle tap, she delivered a genuine, stinging slap right across Flynn's face. Flynn was stunned and reportedly quite angry, snapping at Davis for hitting him so hard. Davis responded with a caustic retort. "If you can't take a little slap, that is just too bad." The director quickly intervened, reminding everyone to remain professional. But the tension lingered. Crew members say Flynn shot Davis a glare every time they prepared for another take involving physical contact. Despite the friction, the private lives of Elizabeth and Essex remains notable for Davis's powerful portrayal and Flynn's charismatic presence. The film did well at the box office, but the slap incident became legendary among Hollywood insiders, showcasing Davis's unwavering commitment to authenticity. Over time, Flynn shrugged it off in interviews, often implying that Davis simply had a fiery spirit. Davis never showed much remorse, maintaining that her job was to bring truth to every scene, even if it meant leaving her co-star with a smarting cheek.